This show was supposed to be kind of a follow-up.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
So last week, Professor Joe Cammarano from Providence College was my guest, and it was a really fluid conversation, and I was telling you that sometimes the challenge of our production time, it puts us in kind of a box, right? Great to have you, and thanks very much for tuning in. And when you do, and if you do on a regular basis, you should know that we record our programs on Thursday in the early afternoon most weeks. And we're doing that again here today, as we did last week. And it was on Thursday of last week that President Biden had to deliver his long-form, ad-lib press conference as a summary of what happened with the NATO conference. And it was his first test, really, in interacting with the press on his ability to stand on his feet and make some kind of a recovery from the debate, which was a couple of weeks prior, right? So we were trying to figure out, Joe and I were, whether or not he was going to be successful with that press conference, or whether it would buoy his standing, and whether it would secure perhaps this notion that he was committed to continuing to run. And so we said, why don't we just come back next week and we'll evaluate the whole thing. That feels like 10 years ago. It feels like 10 years ago. In fact, when I was driving in today, I was trying to figure out, what is it that we said we wanted to see? It was the NATO press conference. And so the debate, which has had its indelible mark on Biden's candidacy, is now feeling like 20 years ago. The NATO press conference, which I think to everybody's objective judgment went reasonably well, feels like forever ago. And the trauma of Saturday around 6 o'clock in the evening has completely jolted the country. Yet as we tape on Thursday afternoon, the tone, which I thought might be suspended for some level of time, seems to have crept back into the presidential race already. In the meantime, the president has COVID and has some time now to perhaps really give some quiet time thinking to what is an enormous amount of pressure that continues to mount on him to leave the race. And so that's kind of where we're going to pick up the conversation, following up on something that we almost forgot we were talking about. I don't want to make light of last Saturday. It was horrific. I was on a golf course following the Rhode Island Golf Association Championship between Bobby Leopold and Mike Hamilton, when people started to look into their phones as they were following the golf. And, and then the chirping went on, and I'm like, I don't take my phone out on the golf course, but okay. Oh, you can't. What? But we learned about it kind of like he was shot and he's okay, which was at least reassuring. You've seen all the stories, but here's what the network had as the latest today, kind of on a recount of what happened and what the investigative summary is all about. Then we'll talk to Joe.
After their most high-profile security breach in decades, the Secret Service, along with the FBI, briefed lawmakers Wednesday on 20-year-old shooter Thomas Matthew Crooks. A source directly familiar with the briefing tells CBS News that Crooks used his phone to search for images of former President Trump and President Biden online. Crooks also searched the names of FBI Director Christopher Wray and Attorney General Merrick Garland and looked up symptoms of depressive disorder. He visited the site of the attack at least once before the rally. Investigators have yet to discover a motive. The Butler County District Attorney says local police informed the Secret Service before the event that they didn't have the manpower to station a patrol car outside the building where Crooks ended up taking his position.
He's going down!
An analysis by CBS News confirmed has found the Secret Service counter-sniper team closest to the shooter likely would have had their line of sight to the building obscured by trees, making it difficult for them to see Crooks clearly. The team farther away fired the single shot that killed him. Minutes after the shooting, cell phone video caught the former president arriving at Butler Memorial Hospital. U.S. Secret Service agents are seen with guns drawn around his SUV before rushing Trump into the ER.
Yeah, where were you? when you heard this news?
I was at the youngest niece's high school graduation barbecue, and one of my nephews ran up to me and said, look, he said, don't tell my dad, we don't need to get into this today, because Dad's the family Republican, or one of the family Republicans, and he didn't want him to get into the conversation. And it was very strange. As somebody who teaches public administration and the administrative state, this is clearly a Secret Service unbelievable failure. I've been to presidential events. I've seen people on rooftops from 3, 4, 5 times the distance of this particular one, and there's just no excuse for this. It's an abject failure, and heads need to roll.
Yeah. That's an apolitical view that everybody ought to have, it seems to me.
Yeah, and I want to make a point. It's the prep. It was the people who go to the advance with the advance people and look around for sight. Look around and say, all right, we have to move the stage 90%, 90 degrees, because that way, if there's anyone on that roof, the crowd will be blocking.
Well, look, we've had that package gave us more and more detail. There'll be more and more detail. Yeah. The Secret Service executive is under a lot of fire here. The entire system is going to have to be reviewed. Who knows if there's? I have nothing but pedestrian questions about it. No expertise. Your overall thought process, I think, is absolutely on the money. Yeah. All I can say is this, though, Joe. My sense of relief over on 2 levels of the president surviving this is conflicted. When I feel like I say thank God, I don't think God, if you believe in a higher power, discriminates or delineates between the life of a president or a volunteer firefighter who covers his family and loses his life in the middle of this, and 2 others who are looking to survive. So their lives are no less important. Certainly on a status level for the management of the country, they certainly are, and that's why people are saying thank God, thank God. Trump himself today, as we speak, prior to his speech tonight, which we could just say, okay, let's get together next week and review what this happened. And I wonder if next week we'll forget what he said on Thursday, because so many things happen over the course of a week to our next taping. My point here is, though, there's a lot of divine intervention conversation going on there. However you see it, it's fate, luck, God, whatever. I say, the sense of relief I have for him, but for the country, is palpable, isn't even close to describing it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a Book of Job guy. Anyone who thinks they know what God is thinking about us doesn't know what they're talking about. We just need to accept that things happen. We need to prevent bad things from happening, and thank God we came within an inch, but we were able not to have President Trump.
And I think it's a waste of energy to project what would have been this week if he had lost his life.
Oh, of course.
Can we just summarize by saying all hell would have broken loose?
Yes, absolutely. And I still worry. We just need to be calm.
We need to tighten it up, man.
And we need to focus on why the Secret Service didn't do the preparation work that they had to do to make sure he was safe.
All right. When we come back, we'll talk about the politics of all this, which have, honestly, just about boomeranged back to where they were last week. We'll be right back. And so again, we are in one of those situations where no, we have not yet seen Donald Trump, but you have. If you care to watch these things, the RNC heads into its 4th night as we tape the broadcast. Here's what we had as an up-to-date reporting.
Tonight, the Republican National Convention wraps up in Milwaukee as former President Donald Trump delivers his acceptance speech for the GOP nomination. Last night, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance formally accepted the party's vice presidential nomination. In his wide-ranging speech, Vance worked to make the case that Republicans best understand the challenges currently facing struggling Americans. The White House confirmed that President Biden has tested positive for COVID-19. Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said in a statement that Biden tested positive after an event in Las Vegas. She says he was experiencing mild symptoms. Meanwhile, in Washington, a new call for the president to suspend his re-election efforts came from California Congressman Adam Schiff. The powerful Democrat says he has, quote, serious concerns about whether the president can defeat Donald Trump in November.
Yeah, so does everybody.
This happened before. 1996, Bob Dole was cut loose by the Republicans because they knew he couldn't beat Clinton. 68, Hubert Humphrey was mostly cut off by people in Congress. 48, Truman got written off by the party. So this is not uncommon, and if he stays, that's what will happen.
So let's talk about the tone first, and we'll talk specifically about the president's dilemma. Look, I was, I woke up Monday morning. I think that's when I texted you saying, how you thinking about things? And I think you said to me, I'm just starting to think about it because you wanted the weekend, and he was okay, and so you had some respite. Like when he was okay, everyone gave themselves a 36 hours to get to the work week to kind of figure out how they felt about what was going on. Monday afternoon, Tuesday afternoon. The sensibilities of the radio show and the lines coming in, everybody was really, I think, in their best comportment. And I tried to offer as an even-keeled presentation as I could, and I will continue to do so because I just think this thing hangs over us as either an omen or a lesson that a 20-year-old kid actually does something that could have changed the course of history, and in failing at it, still changed at least the course of behavior for a few days is kind of interesting. I would assert though, by Wednesday afternoon, the public rhetoric and the jam that Joe Biden was in when asked by Lester Holt from NBC, are you going to change your tone now? Because he was first up for a presidential interview while the RNC was going on that'll flip if Joe Biden's still around. I don't think he will be. By the Democratic convention, they'll interview Trump. It was kind of like I felt bad for him because his rhetoric has certainly elevated and matched Trump's. I think he's clumsy at it, and it hasn't been part of his central plan. But he kind of felt like, how do I not tell you still that January 6th was problematic? How do I not tell you that my entire campaign is based on saving democracy? How do I not tell you those things and still be happy that Donald Trump is alive? What a conundrum.
Yeah, Biden has never been strong at the performance side of his job. He can do the job
even as a younger senator.
Yeah, that's right. He cognitively, in terms of relationships and deal making, he's very capable. But when it comes to actually communicating, he's never been very good. He's always stumbled, and as he gets older, it's worse. And so it's not as much a cognition problem as it is a performance problem. And so it's hard to begin with for him to actually communicate. And as he's older, and now he's in a jam where he used the term bullseye, and if you take it in context, it was a harmless use of that term. It was, we're going to focus on his policy proposals. But the reality now is he doesn't know how to communicate, and he's not as good as he was at it, and now he's stuck. And I just don't see an out for Joe Biden other than retiring or losing.
And the president, the former president rather, reportedly throws out his speech, rewrites it again, and again, you've seen it already before you've watched the show or now excerpts. So it's one of those timing issues that we have here. But reportedly, he's going to have a milder tone. But let me tell you, DeSantis suggesting that Biden is a weekend at Bernie's president. Mm-hmm. The tone that's come out of the convention, as I record here on Wednesday through the first 3 days, is not much less vitriolic than it would have been Friday and before. Democrats are now back on Donald Trump the way they feel they need to be. It's like it was a 2 or 3 day calm, reflect, but get back on the ice and fight this thing in the same way that most Americans are distressed and completely washed out.
Yeah, well, social learning theory from psychology says whatever works and gets you where you are becomes the model for what you do in the future. And so all of these politicians have gotten there by being bombastic. They're not going to change. They don't know how to change. And it worked in the past. Why wouldn't it work now? And so I don't expect much of a change. J.D. Vance insinuated, he gave a very good speech, I thought. I thought it was quite good. And the unifying of the Republican Party was solidified under him.
Well, under what criteria do you judge it as good?
It was sort of filling in all the outlines of what the Trump campaign is about. He mentioned Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Ohio. That's why he was picked to win those states. He talked about his grandmother and how she had 19 handguns in her house, all loaded, because she wanted a gun everywhere because she couldn't get around very fast.
I thought he buried the lead. I thought from a personal connection point of view, that could have been up front, but whatever.
He did confess that he was a vegetarian. Well, his wife confessed that. But the reality is that he did give essentially the red meat outline that now Donald Trump doesn't necessarily have to push as hard. And so he may have set Trump up to be a little more conciliatory.
I will tell you, though, I don't need the pundits to tell me, as I was watching the speech and making a couple of notes, that ain't your father's Republican Party. I mean, I mean, his program, and I think the delegates are pretty unwitting about this, because this has become so Trump-centric. This is Trump's party. It's really, J.D. Vance could have a thought and a policy and his own little platform on anything, anytime, anywhere. As long as Donald Trump picked him, they were going to cheer him. I don't even think they're paying attention to what he's saying, because half of what he's saying is something that leftist liberals would say, and we don't have time to go through the policy stuff right now, but that is not anywhere close to what you would consider to be a Republican conservative platform.
No, of course not. The Republican Party has been realigned. There's no doubt about that.
Realigned, redefined, restructured?
Well, there's a term that political science uses called realignment, when there's a permanent change in the arrangement of the two parties. And I think the Republican Party has finally solidified into a realigned party. It's no longer the party of Wall Street, even though Wall Street backs them up, because their taxes are lower because of that, and regulations are smaller because of that. But they're the party. They're a populist party.
There was no tax discussion in Vance's speech.
No,
none.
No, of course not.
No discussion of Ukraine. Well, he doesn't support continuing to fund the Ukraine war, the Russian.
There were at least
war.
5 or 6 statements of truth that he made that are verifiably false. That doesn't matter. What matters is the narrative. And so he's created the narrative that we are now open for the working class.
You mean political
American.
and campaign success. You're not suggesting innately that it doesn't matter that he was wrong 5 times in the speech.
Well, I get the impression that increasingly for voters who will change their mind, facts don't matter. What matters is impressions.
Professor, that's not a good thing, correct?
That's a very bad thing.
Yeah, you're not suggesting to your students that that's a good thing.
No, actually, I keep telling them they have to fix that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think that facts don't matter right now, and that's not good.
All right. What does Joe Biden do? And by the time you're watching this, did he already do it? Stay with us.
I think that's a project that is still being considered between House leadership, Democratic leadership, and the president and his team, and I don't think there's an answer for it yet. I'm not saying one thing or another, despite your very clever and well-handled efforts to try to get me to say that.
I'm making an assumption that is an answer to the question, do you think Joe Biden is getting out? Sheldon, by the way, has been the most, I don't know, I don't want to say flippant because I didn't consider him flippant, but the most fluid when it comes to the Biden status versus Jack Reed, who has just kind of stood in for him all the way, and the 2 members of the House, Amo and Magaziner, have kind of stood in all the way. Reportedly, Nancy Pelosi went last weekend, Schumer went last weekend. We lost all of that based on the god-awful shooting that occurred, and so all that kind of got buried or lost or delayed or tactically delayed. Now he gets COVID. And now he's got to go home and work from home. It's almost as if the COVID's the break he needed to be able to go back and think about this. Does it make any sense to you?
Yeah, and with great irony, COVID got him to the White House, and COVID might make him realize that he needs to exit.
I said too bad prior to the show. You said...
What did I say?
You said he promised 4 years. He should have stuck to it.
Ah, okay, yeah. Well, that's exactly right. And again, part of the problem
He
with
promised
people,
to be a transitional guy.
I'm a transition. He said he'd be one term, and then his excuse was, well, Trump is coming back, and they have to finish the job. And the reality is he can still save face by saying, I think it's time I leave. I did what I was supposed to do. Now all these great, new, talented people should take the mantle.
Okay. Do we go through a minute's worth of discussion? I guess we should. You are not scheduled for next Thursday. You're off the hook. We have the Speaker of the House here in Rhode Island scheduled for next Thursday. But by the time I get back here next Thursday, will I be talking about the idea that Joe Biden stepped away?
I don't like to make predictions, but I think it's a matter of time, and I have for the past 2 weeks.
Well, time's of the essence, is it not?
It is. I think it has to be done before the convention.
Before his convention.
Before the Democratic convention.
You know,
yes.
I read one smart person on social media who I respect saying it would be the move of the century to actually do it on Thursday afternoon and blow up Donald Trump's news cycle.
I actually don't think that's a bad idea, but I don't think Joe Biden thinks that way.
The process by which he would be replaced would be?
It depends on how he pulls out and when. He can release all of his delegates. He can say, well, you've also voted for my running mate, so I'm going to ask you to support her. It's basically up to Biden.
Is it practical to run a playoff for multiple candidates?
Yeah, you could do that. Actually, think about the ratings at the convention if they did that.
Everyone would be talking about the Democrats in a mini playoff.
And there are a lot of good people on the bench.
Well, you know what? It's probably not smart for us to guess how this thing will go.
Exactly.
But it's likely that Kamala Harris is going to be the one.
I'd say 90% or greater. That's the only logical thing is because all of the money for the campaign can be transferred to her.
And a partner for her would be?
She's got to do something for Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota.
So
and
Shapiro?
That means Shapiro, and you mentioned Beshears. I think Beshears is a good choice. It's got to be a man if Harris is at the top.
Can you believe all this?
If I still had hair on the top of my head, it would all be gone again.
We'll leave it there. You're off next week.
Thank you.
Fun word. With an eye on this crazy political world, we will have Speaker Joe Shekarchi in next week to review what's happening here in the Ocean State. Have a great summer week.